You on, Natasha?
What's that?
Oh, congratulations.
Oh, thank
That's really good news. We can't keep anybody on the board. That's great. Really good stuff.
you. It's a great place to get your feet wet, that's for sure.
That's nice. Really good.
Yeah, yeah.
Janella, the consultant's going to be on this thing, you know?
I believe so.
Hey, Marshall, how you doing?
Good. Yeah, the consultants will be on. Robert, who's the principal with Talus, he could stay on the call till about 3:15. So I don't know how that. He's got an emergency meeting or another meeting, another community. So I don't remember the agenda, but
I hope the meeting could be over by then. Okay.
Well, I'm just saying his time is, we focus. If you want, we could move the minutes maybe to the end of the meeting, just so the.
Well, that minutes really shouldn't take long. Well,
Okay. I just want to make sure you guys have the maximum amount of time with the consultant.
I think that sounds like enough time.
It hasn't been proving that.
I know.
Every time I get this consultant here to talk about water, we're going for like 2.5 hours.
Chairperson Stern,
Yes.
we'll have to wait for member Eisenband for us to have the quorum because member Stump is not going to be here. So we'll have to wait for him to make any motions.
Okay.
Get you now.
Who else are we missing?
Love it.
Who else are we missing? We're still missing, are we?
Member Riami as well. He hasn't logged on yet.
Yeah.
So one or the two.
One of the two, yeah.
One or the two.
No, we still have another minute or two. Marshall just disappeared.
No, I'm trying to multitask. I'm working on an ordinance.
I get it.
Doing this too.
So you want to wait for a quorum to begin this thing? So as soon as we get one more on, we'll get started.
Yeah, because by the time we get to approval of the agenda, we need a motion.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, cool. Okay, we're good. All right.
Okay.
Hello.
Hey, how you doing, Ron? How are you?
Hi, everybody.
Okay, I think we have a quorum now, correct? Yeah.
Yes, we do.
Good. We'll just add Neil in when he comes in. Hello, everybody, and by the way, if you haven't heard the good news, Natasha, it appears, is going to be the next vice mayor, which we all wish our congratulations to her. And we can't keep anybody good in the board. I don't know. That's terrific. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to the virtual Financial Advisory Board meeting, Thursday, December 17th, 2020 at 2 p.m. Kindly silence cell phones. May I have a roll call, please?
Yes. Member Stump? Member Riami?
Here.
Member Greenwald?
Present.
Member Eisenband?
Present.
Hey, how you doing?
Vice Chairperson Moore?
Here.
And Chairperson Stern.
Here, thank you. Okay, if we could all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, appreciate it. pledge allegiance to the
To
flag
the
of
flag of the United States of America.
America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty
and justice
for
for
all.
all.
Nancy,
Okay, let's get to thank you. Let's get to the agenda. Are there any additions or deletions? Hearing none, may I have a motion to accept the agenda as presented, please?
motion to
moved.
Okay, do I have a second, please?
second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, we'll continue. I don't have any public comments. Janelle, is there anybody who is waiting for public comment?
There are no public comments.
Okay, hearing that, we'll continue with the approval of the minutes for September 24th regular meeting. Are there any corrections to the minutes of September 24th?
Yes, there's in B, in the third paragraph, discussion about the 2020 revenue sufficiency and rate study. That sentence doesn't make sense to me if you read through it.
Discussion to so trying to investigate an alternative approach. Yeah,
So there's either something missing or some extra words, but the way it's worded, it doesn't make sense.
I'm sorry, which sentence?
It's Chairperson Stern suggesting that the consultant firm investigate an alternative approach that would decrease the fees being directly charged to owners and result in a no tax deduction on the tax percent. I'm not clear on what that means.
no, I think the statement of no tax deduction was incorrect. I think what we had said that we wanted them to look at the alternative approaches to the fees, and I think they in fact did that with the moving over some of the capital expenditures and other things. So you're correct. That is not clear.
So perhaps, Chairman Stern, you could just work with them to have the wording reflect what you were, it made sense when you were saying it. It just, I can't get it back from this.
Okay, I'd be happy to do that. Are there any other corrections? Hearing none, I would take a motion to accept the minutes with the appropriate correction to that statement.
Motion,
Do I have a motion? Second?
Second.
All right, all in favor, say yes.
Yes.
Anybody opposed? Say no. Thank you. On to unfinished business, and that's the discussion of the 2020 revenue sufficiency and rate study, water and wastewater systems. I refer that to Town Manager Laverty.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, since your last meeting where you discussed the water and sewer rate structure, the board has requested the consulting firm to make some additional adjustments as recently as December 1st. What is new and what you're looking at since your last meeting, some of the big stuff is we reduced the size of the anticipated sanitary sewer project from 4 million down to $1.5 million within that forecast period. We've injected $1 million of fund balance into that forecast period with this, in a sense, to reduce some of the capital impacts to the system, basically to pay for the capital improvements that are in there. We made some adjustments on certain home communities. Certain communities were charged incorrectly. We've made those adjustments. And then recently, after we looked at it, the commission concluded with some things they wanted to see. They wanted to see block 3 and 4 rates increase higher. So in a sense, the bigger users would pay more while benefiting or slightly benefiting the average, the low to moderate type users. Also, they looked at a slight reduction to the ready to serve charge for multifamily homes. And again, the idea was to begin to close the gap on that average cost per 1,000 gallons per class. That gap was at around 42%. And the commission had asked if we could do that base charge and some modifications there to reduce that gap. And that gap has been reduced about 9-10% with this recent change. Also, the commission expressed their willingness to not be complete revenue neutral or revenue sufficiency on those changes, that some type of shortfall would be okay, and we could make that up in the latter years. And the proposal you have that you'll look at or be presented today, one scenario is $90,000 short on revenue. So that's an option, but the sample bills that you were sent, as indicated in my memorandum, shows full revenue recovery. But again, if we went with the one that was 90,000 short, it'd be across the board reduction in all the rates. So the commission expressed they could tolerate that shortfall because one, we could pencil out in our budgets and our estimates and capture that in future years. So that's what you're being presented today. I tried to get you as much information. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to watch a few of the presentations that Robert and Mark made to the commission and that commission discussions. So what you're looking at today does show that. I think there's an interest on the commission to draw towards a conclusion. So they're looking for some feedback from the Financial Advisory Board on are you okay with or without the shortfall, the escalation on blocks 3 and 4, slight reductions on 1 and 2, along with that ready to serve charge reduction to about 90% for multifamily and to close that gap. So without further ado, I know they're a little bit on a time crunch, but I will turn this over to Robert and Mark to bring it home here with the presentation and to go over some of their sample bills and tables that were included in your packet.
Thanks, Marshall. You can call up. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, Marshall gave you a very good overview of what we're going to present. So I'll try to go through it, relatively quickly. And then, of course, as we're going through this, if you have any questions, immediate questions, just give me a holler, or Mark a holler, or Marshall a holler. We'll answer them as we go through, or if you want to wait to the end, it's great. I do want to just present to you all the changes we made to the user rate adjustments since we last spoke to you. Gosh, a couple months ago, I would say. The rate design changes that Marshall outlined and our findings and whatnot. So let's get right into it if we can. Next slide, please. One of the things that because of the infusion of cash for the capital projects, the $1 million that Marshall mentioned, and some of the directives received by the commission, we've adjusted the rate adjustments that was last presented to y'all. And this slide kind of summarizes what these adjustments have been. I'm really going to look at probably October 21st, which was fiscal 22 forward. We do also an adjustment in April of 21. Just to let you know, you did adopt, I believe, a 3% rate increase that went into effect October 1st. So that is, we're not showing that, but this is in addition to that. As you can see, the rate adjustments as being proffered now, which is the recommended rate adjustment line, in all years but the last year is less. Again, based on the infusion of cash and changing the way the debt service transfer from the general fund, reimbursing the fund to the full enterprise. We levelized that out another year or so at the request of the commission, again, to try to drive some of the rate adjustments down a little bit. And you can see what the results were. As you can imagine, the biggest adjustment was in wastewater. And if you think about it, that's where we had the $4.5 million capital project that was not only reduced, but then we applied the $1 million of funding to that, since our thought was, since that's a large capital project, it's an infusion of cash. Let's try to buy down potentially future debt and whatnot. And that allowed us actually to bring that rate adjustment forward and reduce it, because we were building up for that. So I thought that was was very good. And you can see the rate adjustments are much less. We are recommending an April 1st rate adjustment. It's only going to be in effect for 6 months. And as we walk through this and show you the rate levels for the average or typical residential using, I think, 25,000 gallons, your rates are going to remain competitive with your neighbors. And actually, we actually went out to the October 24 timeframe, and you still are going to be, I think, competitive. So that's the good news. Way in advance when I'm going to show it to you, but so that's what's happened there. So reduction in rates for the benefit of your customers. Next slide, please. This is what Marshall was talking a lot about earlier. What were some of the rate changes? We met with the commission twice, as I remember, and this kind of gives you a summary of everything. We've maintained the existing rate structure and classes. What that kind of means is we still have a base charge. We still have flow charges with blocks for water, although the tiers may have changed. That structure is still being maintained. And the classes that you're aware of, residential, single family, multifamily residential, and commercial, are still in existence. We did allocate the expenses between base and, our fixed costs and variable cost recovery. That was some. Can you hear that? You ready?
Okay.
Actually, that sounds a lot better than me. I'll tell you that. Any event, we did look at the fixed variable cost relationships just to validate that we were fine. We are. Water, we looked at what's called the base extra capacity or peak relationship, utilizing your monthly operating reports filed with the Department of Environmental Protection and whatnot. And wastewater, that the variable cost includes the purchases, wholesale provider, as we discussed previously, with the remainder being recovered in the base charge. The directives, as Marshall mentioned, reduce the multifamily average cost per gallon relationship. There was one thing we showed you, and we'll show you again. When you look at the cost per gallon or per 1,000 gallons, when you add all the costs together, the multifamily average cost per 1,000 gallons is very high compared to the other two classes. Although we would think it would be higher than the other two classes because of the utilization of water, vacancies of accounts, whatnot, it was pretty significant. And one of the directives was start moving to kind of reduce that, still maintain reasonable rates among your customer classes. Let's see if we can reduce that, as Marshall mentioned. So we are looking at reducing the base charge. That was the last directive. Bring it down some. We're going to recommend the 90% of the residential rates right now. We also, as Marshall mentioned, increasing the water conservation incentives, which makes the higher blocks have a higher rate and try to lower the first two blocks a little bit, more of a steeper conservation curve, with the ultimate goal to try to limit or minimize the average single family customer to more of the average rate adjustment. No change in implementation of the wastewater volumetric rate. That is still being proffered to you all as we discussed last time. So those are some of the rate design changes that you'll be seeing here shortly. Next slide, please. As we mentioned, the base charge is being adjusted to 90% of the residential and commercial rates. Many utilities that have a multifamily dwelling unit type rate like you all do, in many instances have a multiplier or percentage application to that rate for multifamily. Example, Palm Beach County is 80%, Martin County is 50%. I just looked at this yesterday. Lake Worth is about 67%, Wellington 84%. So they got some factors, and the point is the multifamily class generally has lower demands per dwelling unit than residential, and we know that to be true here. So that was an adjustment we made. We recommended 90%. It could possibly be lower, but the reason why we're recommending that is we're making a lot of rate changes here going toward the variable type of rate structure. Wastewater flow charge is a good example. And I want to make sure that we move the right path, going the right direction, but let's still try to maintain some revenue stability, maintain some consistency so that we don't have too much risk in our system. Although we're talking about, gosh, we can probably take a $100,000 reduction. We want to look at about that. The issue becomes what happens if that's $200,000 or $300,000 because the reactions are so great. And although we've tried to plan for that, I felt, and my recommendation is, yes, let's move the right direction, but let's keep an eye on it. The other item that was done in the tiers, when we first presented to y'all several months ago, we had the first tiers, and we did the tiers at 20,000 gallon increments. That was requested to increase that tier to 30,000 gallons, which we have in the new rates, we have that. But we did adjust the tiers for multifamily by that 90% factor. Generally, if you have a base charge as a multiplier to single family, your blocks follow that. So it's the same type of relationship, that per ERC type relationship. If I'm a multifamily, I want to exceed the 27,000 gallons per unit per every 2 months, then I should be paying a higher rate than not. So we've done that. Also adjusted the cap for sewer as well. Still recommending a cap only applicable to residential classes, and that would be the first tier. So as a result, increased conservation incentive, as you can imagine, where this is also going. Next slide, please. This is the current rates today. You've seen this chart before. The only difference in this chart that you haven't seen is we have the fiscal 21 rates that went into effect October 1st in here. Just by bring you some observations again. Every unit pays the same flat charge per unit, residential, multifamily, commercial per unit, water $34.60, sewer $45. If you look at the gallon blocks, you had 3 blocks for residential and commercial. They pay the same, and they're applied the same. Multifamily, interesting enough, the first block was less, terminating at 13,000 gallons. 68% of the residential first block. Then they had a 10,000 gallon block for the second that was priced way below what the blocks are for single family and commercial. And then anything above 23,000 gallons, they paid a higher rate. Other thing to note, the first rate and the last tiered rate for multifamily are the same as single family. The middle rate was different. And to me, personally, I think the rates for all tiers should be the same for your customers. There should be no difference. The only thing that should be different on the tiers should be if you have a fractional unit calculation, i.e. that 0.9 type factor. Wastewater, again, flat charge only, no usage charge as you see here. So where are we going? What's kind of happened from this point forward? If you could go to the next slide, please. Gives you the water rates, and you have 3 columns on here. Basically, the initial rate structure is the rate structure when we last met several months ago, what we presented to y'all, and what was first presented to the commission. I called it the commission first adjustment. We weren't quite sure what to call these things, so it could be scenario 1, scenario 2. We called it commission first adjustment. You can see that the blocks, for example, went to 30,000, spread the gallons out a little bit to try to give more rate relief to the lower end user. Yes, Mark, thank you or whoever's doing that. I appreciate that. And then we raised the flat charge a bit. The second adjustment for water is we've kept the same blocks. The base charge, I've got pictures here. I can't, hold on a second. Maybe I can move these over here. The flat charge stayed the same, but as you can see on the flow charges, they went up on the tail end quite a bit. And so we had to raise the first block a little bit because and this is the rates we got. Then on the multifamily, you have a 0.9% factor with the same blockages. You can see the adjustments to them for the 90%. Now, kind of what was some of the things that happened here? That flat charge reduction in multifamily is worth approximately $100,000 easy of lost revenue per se. So that affected some of the blocks. We changed them a little bit. We had to recapture some of that. We wanted to recapture that change in dollars, and that caused some of the blocks to go up a little bit. So that's where we are today with water. Sewer, there really wasn't much change from what was presented before. You can see the first initial tier structure, the flat charge being reduced from the $45 because we have the volumetric charges now. When you look at the middle column, basically the only real change is going to 30,000 gallons. There were some minor tweaking adjustments that we did. We tried to keep the base charge up a little bit and whatnot. But then as you go to the revised rate structure, the rates are adjusted just slightly because we've lost revenue gallons from the multifamily class. And what happens there is if I put the cap at 27,000 gallons a unit bi-monthly, there's use that goes beyond, that was going beyond the 30,000 gallons originally, i.e. the first adjustment. Because we lost those, we had to tweak the gallon rate up just slightly to keep to the same rate structure and rate level that we had in the first adjustment. No real change here, but kind of like tweaking like we had in water a little bit. As you move parts, other parts change slightly. And here's a good example of a slight change. So you can see from where we were today, using this as an example, the blocks, can you go back up to water, back to slide 7? Just to recap, the blocks changed, as you can see, from initial rate structure to 1. The base charge concept remained the same for dwelling units, but in the second adjustment, you can see that there's the 90% base charge reduction, the flow gallon tiers reduction, and then we tweaked with a higher conservation incentive on the team.
Rob, I have a comment about this. I guess one concern I have about this is that it kind of overcomplicates the rate structure, because now we went from your original proposal basically had one method that was going to be applied to all the customer classes. Now we're going to 2 different flat charges, different sizes of tiers. Couldn't we, and I think the reason for this is because the average cost per 1,000 gallons for single family compared to multifamily, we were getting further apart and we're trying to narrow that gap. Couldn't we narrow that gap by, we could use the same flat charge, but if we narrowed the tiers, so for example, go from 0 to 10 or 0 to 15 gallons and had some, lower amount, then the next tier, so basically the first 2 or maybe 3 tiers, I don't know, would kind of represent like more of the average flows for multifamilies versus single families, so that we could use one rate structure, one flat charge, one set of tiers that would work well for both single families and multifamilies, so that we could narrow that gap. So we could keep the $39.25 flat charge, make the first tier, let's say 0 to 10 or 0 to 15, and reduce that amount. Then you'd have the second tier which would go up to maybe 50,000 or something like that, and it would go up. And I think some of the feedback you got when you had, and this is kind of closer to your original proposal, and I think some of the feedback that you got from the commission was that it almost looked like we were penalizing single families compared to multifamilies. And I just want to emphasize, I really don't think it should be viewed as a penalty, but the benefit of doing it this way is you can narrow the gap of the average cost per gallon using the same rate structure. And I think it just simplifies this a lot more. And then you don't run into that issue of, I guess there was that one single family community that was classified as a multifamily instead of a single family. It was put in the wrong thing. If you just had one rate structure that we all fit into, then it would be much more simple, and we would achieve the narrowing of the gap of the average cost per 1,000 gallon.
Let me, you're right. Let me tell you my observations from your question. I think you have several in there. First of all, you are correct that the rate structure as initially presented, and what you kind of have today, is much simpler than the last structure by the fact everybody pays the same per ERU, as you mentioned. That is correct. As you can see, you have multiple blocks and whatnot, and a different flat charge. I will tell you that it's not uncommon for multifamily to have a different block structure, but you are right. There's more rates sitting there. I'm not saying you're wrong. You're right on that observation, but what you see on the second adjustment is not uncommon by any means.
I mean, I think it's because people don't fully understand
Right.
how it mathematically works out. And there's,
Right.
the original, the commission thought it was like a penalty, but it's not a penalty.
It's not a penalty at all.
It is reflecting the special characteristics of our town. I think by having narrower tiers with a better differentiation of the amount per tier is a better reflection of the characteristics of our town and should not be viewed as a penalty. And by making these tiers too big, especially at the lower end, we're actually making the problem worse, where the average cost per gallon is getting bigger, a bigger difference between the multifamilies and the single families.
Well, yeah, the average cost, the lower you put the first block, obviously it's going to affect the multifamily probably better than the single family, because single family has so much flow, as you know.
Right.
The bigger adjustment to the multifamily is the flat rate. If you think about it, $39 is a big number if you got 10,000 gallons versus 100,000 gallons to recover, as you know. That being said, I mean, you're almost describing to some degree, from what first thing came to my mind was, you're looking at more of an inverted curve from what I'm hearing. It's almost back to the existing rate structure.
Yes, that's why we are where we are.
But with potentially a higher conservation curve. In other words, I'm going to go back to the initial rate structure. And let's stick with 275 for a second, 404. I'm kind of hearing, gosh, if I raised and took the commission's directives of higher tiers in the tail end, more conservation, more directed to single families, we all know. If you put in 607 and 817, which is the numbers to the right, far right, for those two tiers.
Right.
I know the blocks are different. That's part of the issue here.
Right.
You could, everything else being equal, 275 could drop.
Yes.
No doubt about that.
Well, maybe even the first two tiers. I think we even almost redefine the tiers maybe a little bit better, because I think everybody seems to like the 60,000 and above to have higher amounts.
Yes, they do.
So I think we keep the upper, the 60 to 90 and above 90 at those really high amounts. And I mean, my recommendation would be, I don't know, 0 to 15 or something like that. I don't know, maybe 0 to 20. And hopefully you have this automated in a spreadsheet somewhere so we can kind of look at these different scenarios. But I would reduce that first tier. I don't know, see how those tiers work out. Because my hunch is we can narrow that gap of the average cost by playing with the tiers and playing with the dollar amounts per tier. And yes, we can do what the commission wants, which is increase the 60 and above to kind of get to, to encourage water conservation.
I mean, the issue you have, and it's subtle, is most of your flow from multifamily is in the first block.
Right.
0 to 30. I think 50 to 60% of your total flow is in the first block. And so if you lower the first block down, I'm going to make this up, 20 cents a thousand. That's a lot of dollars to get in from the last 2 blocks. And so that's why I went with 0 to 20 and 20 to 40 the first time was, I need flow to get pricing. I like 20. I like 20 originally, why we recommended it, because that's more of indoor use, which links to that sewer cap, as we talked about the first time. I can live with 30, but it's a little high, but 15,000 gallons a month, that's kind of your 15 you mentioned. That's what the 30,000 gallons is.
Yeah, I think it's too big. I think it's too wide of because like you said, you can't, it creates too big of a difference between.
I have no flow.
Yeah.
Once I get past there, I'm running out of gallons.
Yes.
And so I have to steepen the curve even more.
And the other thing, Rob, that I'm a little concerned about, and I don't know if I'm just not looking at it correctly, but how are you incorporating the irrigation meters? So when you calculate the average cost per gallon and you're comparing single family to multifamily, where are the condos that have established an irrigation meter? So it's an irrigation meter, it's one EDU, there's no sewer associated with it. When we're comparing the average cost, for a condo that has that additional meter, is that being put into the multifamily?
It's in the multifamily. It's in the multifamily class.
It for sure is, because I guess my only thing is when I look at.
Isn't that right, Mark?
Yes, I believe so.
I mean, I guess I just want to double check that, because when so I'm a realtor, when I look at the databases that I have and I count up how many single families we have in Highland Beach, I get about 60 less than this 420. You're saying that there's 420? And it's just curious to me that there's about 60 irrigation meters. So
that was the billing data provided, and that's how they were classed. That's
because those irrigation meters, I wouldn't want them to be considered single families, because that's going to throw off your.
And we built in an irrigation rate, and it's not on this sheet, but really the irrigation would be the start off at the second block, not the first block. So if you had an irrigation meter, you'd pay your flat charge on the irrigation meter, and then you'd go to, I'm going to use the last column, your first block, say to 60,000, before 22,607, you wouldn't start at 292. And part of the reason for that, if you got an irrigation meter and a domestic indoor use, if you have one and I don't, really those flows are added on top of each other. If you think about it.
Yeah.
So sure. I'm not going to give you're the irrigation separate meter. I'm not going to give you the benefit of a lower flow, a lower rate twice. But because the irrigation meter really is there for not paying any sewer charges if that's what happens. And that's why we have it in there.
So when you do that statistical information by customer class, the multifamilies that have the irrigation meters,
it's in there.
Those, okay, so I don't understand why,
That's why you're getting some customers with 15,000 gallons a unit.
Well, there also may be a differential because we did reclass some multifamily to single family. So that 420 is really, it's 383 accounts. There's two accounts that we reclassed, I think Ocean Grand and Ocean, I forgot the other one, it's Ocean something.
I know, when I pull my data out from my sources, Ocean Grand, Ocean Cove are in the single family, and I get about 360 single
Oh.
families, and you're getting 420. And it's just curious to me that the difference is about 60, and that's about how many irrigation meters we have. So I just want to make sure that the multifamily irrigation meters are not getting counted with single family residential.
Yeah, well, I can tell you the 383 that we have for the accounts. I have individual accounts that go with addresses for like single family homes, and then the additional 40 or so on top of that is the Ocean Grand and the Ocean Cove, which we added in this I guess 2 adjustments ago
Okay.
at the
So-
request of the commission.
So the other thing that looks a little quirky to me is in the statistical information by customer class, when you compare the flows, and so for example, the residential flow for 2019 is 128,000, almost 129,000, but the sewer is 31,000, almost 100,000 different. But when you compare the multifamily, the water flows compared to the sewer flows
They're
are
very
really
close.
close. Like why?
Right, that's correct. The reason why that is all dealing with the billing cap. Let me go by example. If the cap is set at 20,000 or 30,000 gallons, in this case, I think the one you'd be looking at maybe 30,000.
Rob, those are the actual flows
Oh, okay.
from 2019. She's talking about the 2019 like water and then the sewer flows.
But I thought that you had the cap on the sewer flows.
Those are,
Raw data,
Yeah.
yeah.
but it's not capped. It's just the raw data, the flow data. I would speculate it's irrigation because the residential class irrigates
Oh, okay. I thought that was the cap.
per unit.
The
Maybe the
multifamily
irrigation.
irrigates too, and there's more irrigation meters on multifamily than there is on residential. So I don't
That's in
understand.
the 226. So Mark, you help me out here.
What's in the 226?
That's the
220
build. That's the
Yeah,
build.
that's the build wastewater flows. I'm just looking through the model to see.
Well, those could be.
Because if my hunch
We
is
don't meter flow out in the sewer system, so it's got to be a projection. It's got to be.
It would,
We don't
yeah, it
measure
was,
flows going out outside of the total at the very end of the pipe. Is the only place we measure.
Okay, so that actually raises a fundamental question that I had, which is, as you're calculating the wastewater flow rates, what is actually being included in that? Is there some formula by which you're excluding water that's being used for irrigation and pool evaporation and cooling
Yeah.
tower evaporation and all that? Or is it just, how is that being determined currently?
What we did, we took the dollar value first, calculate the dollars to be recovered in the flow charge, and that was primarily your wastewater treatment charges. And we divided it by the build flow, the metered water use that would be charged the sewer use. So if you had irrigation demands over and above that went above the cap, let's say, they would not be included if it was that irrigation water was included in the domestic.
No, I'm talking about a residential,
Yeah.
single-family home.
They would not pay any,
X amount of water,
they should pay no.
of which most of which probably does
irrigation.
not enter the wastewater system.
That is correct.
Okay.
right. So that's why we
So
have.
how are we, let me finish. So how are we calculating what that home is charged for the wastewater system. Because to me, irrespective of whether it's a single family home or a multi-unit dwelling or whatever, unless you're talking, and you have two people living in each one, and we can't count how many people there are, but for the sake of argument, there are two people in each one. Unless you're saying, you know, one family's got really bad dysentery and urinary tract infections or is showering constantly, I don't see where their wastewater usage should be that different.
The waste,
Their intake of water can be hugely different from the clean water side, but not their wastewater side. And I'm not clear how we're accounting for that in this system, except in any homes that might have, if you will, an outflow meter, which most places,
Well,
as you pointed out, do not.
no, they do not. What we do is that's why we put the billing cap on the residential and the per unit multifamily is to cap it. Because if your meter has 100,000 gallons of flow attached to it right now, and I'm serving you, I would agree with you that the amount of that flow, most of that does not go to the sewer system. I would agree with that. And so we recommended that you have a billing cap on those type of meters such that it stopped the sewer charge stops at 30,000 gallons per everybody month. You could have a 100,000 gallon water bill, but you're gonna have a 30,000 gallon then sewer bill under the premise that not all of that's going to the sewer system.
Right. And my question is, how did you calculate that? Because my suspicion would be that is still very high. And there's no way to know without having a meter there. I agree with you there.
You don't know. You don't know what the true sewer deposit. One thing you do know is how much wastewater is being treated, and how much wastewater and how much flow is being billed.
Yeah, we know how much is getting to the Delray line, but we don't know how much is being produced by each customer.
And Mark, I can't get to the, hold on a second. I can't get to this.
So the point being, when we get to a page further on in the presentation, we're not there yet, but I'll bring it up. There's a chart that shows that for medium use single residential homes, that wastewater charges our sewer charges are gonna go up by 124%. Well, I don't see how we as a government can take that to anybody and say, here's what your new rates are.
Hang on a second.
It's on one of the green charts. I'm not sure what page it's on.
I'm in the wrong model here.
Yeah,
It's page.
it's the sample bill tab of the.
Yeah, it's the last page. It's a sample bill.
I've lost the presentation. Where is it?
Do you want me to email to you, Rob?
No, I'm trying to get back to the presentation. I can't get to it.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's not on the last page. It's page 18 and it's on a gray chart. It's a sample bill calculation, average user residential.
This is it. I can't get to the presentation. There you go. Sorry, I'm off video, so I can't see it.
Well, while we're looking for that, there was another more general question that I wanted to ask, which
Let me get back. If you,
that's fine.
I would make about that. Yeah, the sewer's going up 124%, but the overall water bill is going up 15 to 23%.
No, I understand that, but what I'm saying is that increasingly, as we get into this, and I think as the town commission has gotten into it and made multiple changes and we've adjusted things, when we start looking at the numbers, they look increasingly gerrymandered, if you will, to make things fit. And what we need is a general, I don't know, theoretical framework in some way to make this work more understandably, I think, for people.
Let me try to answer some of your questions. First of all, back to the, how do we calculate the sewer flow? We looked at each bill, bi-monthly bill for residential service and commercial service based on the billing data Mark got from the city, every bill every month or by month, and did what we call a bill frequency. We said, if you use 100,000 gallons, your first 30,000 gallons is for tier 1, et cetera, et cetera. And we added all those up. The reason why we also did that is if 30,000 gallons is the cap for sewer, we would know the difference, how much billed Q would be for sewer versus how much is not being billed for sewer. So we did that for each bill provided by the city. The 100% increase in wastewater, I need to look at where those figures are coming from. But I believe what you're referring to is large users of primarily the single family residential class are going to get significant rate adjustments on sewer from where they are today. The reason for that is totally going to the volumetric rate. By way of example, right now, everyone's paying $45, regardless of who you are. You could use 30,000 gallons of sewer and I could use 0, and we're both paying 45. By pulling out the flow, you're shifting cost recovery to the larger user. So that $45 becomes $100, let's say, I'm just making that number up because it's gone up. Me at 0 went from $45 to $25 or $28. Big gap there. So it's been a shift, and that may be part of the percentage increases you're seeing. But we did see for the large users or anybody using up to 30,000 gallons single family, they were getting a shift in the wastewater cost recovery to them, and hence a large bill. That may be what you're seeing. I don't know, but that would probably be.
Well, I'm sure it is what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that, you know, without meters to get an accurate representation, I think that we're counting a lot of irrigation and other water that's not entering the wastewater system, and you know, essentially billing people for it under this. Well, you're going to go up to wherever your number is, 20 or 30,000 gallons, even though they're not using that into the wastewater system. Because again, it just doesn't make sense to me that if you have 2 people in a multi-family dwelling and 2 people in a single family dwelling, that somehow or other the people in the single family dwelling are going to have 4 or 5 times as much water entering the wastewater system. I can see how they can use 4 times as much water on the clean end coming in because they're sprinkling their bushes. But I just don't see it on the other side.
Well, you're right. I mean, that's why we recommended doing a cap, to try to at least account for that. And that's why originally I recommended 20,000, because 10,000 gallons, and that could be a little high too, but 10,000 gallons a month is a very typical indoor use cap, because you may have 2 people in your house and I may have 6.
Correct, but we can't count that.
You cannot count that. I totally agree with you there. So what many utilities do, there's two issues you brought up. The first one is you measure sewer by water use, which, although it's a good proxy, it's not a complete proxy. I agree with that, because you can't measure sewer use leaving the house. If you could, we'd have a different rate than we do now, and I agree with that. The second is most utilities generally put some sort of cap or provision to recognize that we know not all that water is going to sewer. Let's at least recognize there's going to be, you know, a stopping point somewhere where it doesn't go in. And that's why we put the cap in there. We thought it was fair to do that than not do that, go into a volumetric rate. I mean, that is fairer than me paying $45 and I'm using one.
No. That's definitely better than not doing anything. I don't know that it gets us where we would be if we actually had meters, but
Well, it's totally different.
As an aside, is that a feasible thing to put meters to actually measure? No one has.
No one has it.
Okay.
Only place I see wastewater meters generally, large industrial, wholesale service, things of that nature.
Okay,
But the problem with the whole wastewater meters is, you probably know this, is you're measuring solids, not just flow. And it's hard to measure
Right.
solids. You got to put a magnetic meter around it.
I got it. So there always has to be some sort of a surrogate estimate that you end up using rather than a true metric.
Yes, sir.
Got it. Thank you.
And hence the cap.
Yes. No, I get it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So
Let
let's,
me go back to the rate issue that Natasha was talking about. I mean, this, as you say, Rob, you need to keep an eye on this thing. This is not a decision that is going to be cast in stone forever and ever. If there's something, I mean, just the way we're making changes now, we can make changes in the future. There's no one that says, since we have a fixed amount of money, and it's not a fixed amount of money, but we have money that we have to take care of, we have to pay for in a sense, and how we pay for it is all we're really looking at. And these numbers have been tweaked, so many times, and you can keep fooling around with them, raising and lowering things and so forth. This structure will, if I'm not correct, will satisfy the Southeast Florida water situation.
yes,
It gives us a framework to start. It gives us conservation. It brings the single family and multifamily closer together. It's a clear beginning. And we
Yes.
can sit here, and the commission can sit here forever trying to tweak this quote better. And I've had it in a sense. I've watched these things for a long time now, and this rate structure makes sense to me. I don't see any reason why we should have the shortfall. These rates were put in with the shortfall in the 90,000 included. And in fact, if you eliminate that, you actually pull apart a little bit of the achievement of bringing the two, multifamily and residential, closer together. So actually, it's smarter to take that 90 grand in as part of what we see, and let's move on. I mean, let's get this over with. We're not going to be able to monitor every gallon of water that goes out the sewer system, et cetera, et cetera. This is a well thought out plan. Let's get it over with.
well,
I would really like to see one block structure. I mean, I know we're all kind of getting fatigued with this whole situation, but I really think that we could come up with one box, one flat charge, one set of tiers that would accomplish, what our goals are. Because I'm afraid, just like kind of now, we at the beginning of this, we kind of looked back at our tiers and we said, why did we do this? Why did multifamily have this different tier? Why did multifamily have a different cost for the second tier? My preference would be to come up with one that satisfies all the objectives. I don't think it would be that difficult. I imagine the consultants have this all automated where we can just plug in different scenarios. That would be my recommendation.
May I make a recommendation that we continue with the presentation and then at the end make total recommendations? I have a few myself, but I'd like to hear the balance of the presentation, if that would be okay.
yeah, okay. Yeah, 'cause I need to really move it myself. I have a 3:30 I gotta get to. Let's go to the sample bills real quick. Mark, if you get there, or whoever.
Yeah.
I just want to look at one thing only, and if you could take me to the average per customer, the average bill per customer.
It's on the statistical information tab. Yeah, all the way to the right. Yep, that's what he wants.
Right. You can see just very quickly you got the initial recommendation, the revised recommendation, and the recommendation as of last week that we're talking about today. And the only other one, if you look at water, the multifamily, I'm looking at the middle revised recommendations, paying about $7,000 a thousand, and the other classes are a lot lower. And that's the average use, the average bill per gallon sold. And the reason why that is higher, as you all know, it's the recovery of the fixed cost over a lot less gallons than the residential commercial. If you look at the revised structure today, that does narrow a bit, about 15 cents or so. That's a pretty big movement considering the 90%. That's probably being driven by the 90%. If we look at flow, I think we could achieve something, a reduction. This far of a reduction, I do not know the answer to that. It depends on, how far we go, what's the first block. But everything else pretty much stays the same. So I just want to mention that as we move forward, this last rate structure does try to kind of bring together those average unit costs relationships from the water side. And that was a big concern. Members of the commission try to do that. And that's, again, one reason why we went to 90%. But you are right, Vice Chair, that if we looked at the blocks a little bit, I cannot dispute that the first block, there's more gallons in the first block for multifamily. And from a pricing standpoint, they probably get the best benefit from that.
Yeah, Rob, I really think the reason why this went to 7 is because the tiers were expanded and you have the same, if we were to shorten the tiers and put a lower amount on that first tier, we would narrow that gap. It's not because of the fixed charge, it's because of the tiers were expanded. Well,
the second block was also increased to match the same rates everybody else, which they should be. Why should they get a break on the second block and no one else gets that? What's the benefit? What's the purpose or the cost relationship for that? I can't think of one.
I think they did that to narrow the gap.
They may have.
I am convinced that's why they did that.
And that's, to me, not right. The blocks should all be the same based on relationship. Right. I understand an ERC difference. I get that one. But to arbitrarily lower a second block for one class and not the others, I didn't want to make that recommendation to you.
That's why I think we can come up with one block structure with tiers that achieve this. And then we won't be looking back 10, 15 years like, why did they do that?
So, but anyway, that was the reason why the 90% and trying to get there. So let's go back to the presentation real quick. If we can, sorry. And I just wanted to show you, you've seen this before. This is a rate comparison of your rates as of today with a lot of your peers and neighbors in South Florida. For the town, you are the light blue, light pink type color versus the others being the dark colors. Blue's water, red is sewer. And you can see most of your cost is water-based right now. If you look at the 20, where the cursor is right now, that's the rates that are in effect as we speak today. And the proposed rate adjustments, this is single family at a 25,000 gallons of monthly use, not bi-monthly, but monthly, 50,000 gallons for 2 months. With the rates as we have them structured right now, if you'll slide to the right, it's about right in the middle. The cursor's already there. I'm sorry, I didn't see it. It would move toward the middle, still be below the average of all these other custom utilities at 25,000. Then we went ahead and put in, if we take the rate those percentage increases going forward, that we showed you earlier, just put them across the board, we'd be at that spot right there at 206. And to be honest with you, I was really happy for the town that even though the rate goes up to over $200 a month at a high water use of 25,000 gallons, typically, you're still not at the highest end, and none of these other utilities have had rate adjustments for 4 years. So the observation I got and I thought was a favorable one for your residences and users, is that your rates, I think, are going to stay competitive for a long time, regardless of your structure, unless we do something really radical, which I know we're not going to do. So I thought that was real good. Just to let you know what those increases and what you did to lower the rate adjustments with the infusion of cash and whatnot, I thought was beneficial. Next slide, please. I think that the results of the plan, we've talked about this before. It allows you to fully fund your capital. I always keep going back to where you want to be fiscally and financially, because that's really to me the driver and the overall crux of the rates is where are we fiscally. You will be able to fund your capital program. We did use the $1 million, as mentioned earlier, to buy down the wastewater projects, and also allows to transfer the debt repayment to the enterprise fund at the time. We lowered that down a little bit, spread it out, as I mentioned earlier. I think the plan is still is a very good one, with a goal to get it completely to the enterprise fund within the next 5 years or so. I think you do promote a favorable credit and a strong fiscal position. You've got increasing margins, which is the money after you spend for O&M, what's left over for debt or capital reinvestment. It's growing. It's on the right path. We did that on purpose to try to improve your R&R capital as your system keeps aging. Get a better blend. We'll have a better ability to have a better blend of debt versus capital or equity financing, which is your own system. So that is really good. We maintain a good liquidity position. Although we're using cash, you're still very, very strong and your rates are competitive. So I'm wherever we end up, I think fiscally you look good. If I can go to the next slide. And then we would recommend, we need to adopt a 5-year plan. The plans that we present to you will work. If you want us to look at, and based on what the directions from Marshall, we can try to look at another structure if you want to try to work the other way again. But I think, we're really honing in on where we kind of need to be. And at some point, I think we need to adopt a rate. And I can't remember who said it, but you can always adjust rates in the future based on changing conditions, whatnot, or if they stay where they are and they're healthy, stay where you are. I mean, you always have the position to keep improving as you move forward. And that's something we would always recommend you to do, is to monitor your position and whatnot. We know water use is changing. We know the attributes of your customers can be changing, more awareness of conservation. We understand the effects of, climate change is having effects on this. There's a lot of influences on our rates and whatnot. So, whether you look at it for a fiscal reason or look at it for a rate recovery or cost recovery reason, i.e. rates, you need to do that every year. And you guys do that through your budgetary process, but also through this program every 5 years or so. So we would recommend that you continue to do that. And that's really was, I think, the end of our presentation.
So I guess one question, Rob, that million, what are we trying to recover that first year? We're getting the $1 million transfer. Is it possible? And I know that our millage rates are going to go down as we, make the water more self-sufficient. Is it possible to pretty much use that $1 million transfer to cover the increase that we need that first year, and then use the subsequent years of increases? And then I guess second to that is the 5th year, it's a 2.5% increase, but we're used to 3% increases. That's what Town of Highland Beach typically gets. So isn't that 5th year really not much of an increase at all?
Well, let me go to that one first. That's a little bit more of an easier way. The 5th year, I was trying to keep it to the consumer price index type adjustment, try to keep it to inflation. I see 3%, 2.5%, 2%. What we wanted to get to was an inflationary adjustment, not incremental increases above that. Get to the end of the plan as best as we can. That's what, if you wanted 3, that's not an issue. If that was the minimum you wanted, when we looked at the Congressional Budget Office increases for CPI, it was around the 2.5 range. And so we picked that to say that's reasonable. We don't want to overdo it. And that's why we picked that. The $1 million is a different question. If you put $1 million into the system and bought down the rates, you're going to have a bigger strike back later on. You're going to need a much bigger increase, not 15%, 15. You're going to need 45% to get back where you are, because you're going to have to debt fund the wastewater improvement program, which is now not being debt funded at all because we're applying the dollars to it, the $1 million to it. Your rates are under recovering because you're utilizing cash to do it. And I think what's going to happen is once that $1 million dries up, so to speak, and your CIP continues to advance, you're going to have a larger increase. What we tried to do was utilize the $1 million to buy down that debt. Now we can use some of it, obviously, but we felt that keeping the minimizing the debt as you're adding debt to the system through the reimbursement, taking away from the general fund, those are new debt issues to you, and new debt to the system. Even though it's old debt, it's new debt to the rates. So what we saw is if you can get out past 2024, your old bonds are starting to drop off and whatnot, and you're in a different position. That's the other reason why 2.5%. You become a much stronger credit because your debt is changing. And also we're utilizing the impact fees, recommending the impact fees for water to use to pay the debt as well to benefit the system. We're doing that too. So if you put more up front, we can lower the rate, but there's gonna be a strike back eventually. You're gonna have to raise the rates to capture it. And the question is, when we looked at your rate competitiveness, where you stand today, knowing you need to reimburse the system with that new debt, the transfer from general fund to the utility, we felt it's better to go ahead and start raising rates now and not trying to buy down that rate artificially. So we didn't recommend that. But could you do it? Yeah, you could do it. Would I recommend it? Probably would not.
Thank you. I have a statement, a question, but I first want to hear if anybody else on the board has any additional questions.
I have one further question, if I might. First, I'd like to thank Rob again for all the help and his incredible patience that he's displayed through this process. I just want to confirm that our current proposed flat monthly charges for both water and sewer are based on actual fixed cost calculations. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
When we had started this process, some of the folks on the commission said, no, that shouldn't have anything to do with this. But in fact, that's for that portion of things, it's based on that actual calculation, which I think is good because it means in 5 years we can go back and change rates while still applying the same principles if some of the facts on the ground change. So I'm pleased with that.
Yeah, and I would tell you about your base charge. You're a small system, and that base charge is real good for you to some degree because it provides revenue stability. As you know, you'll always get that $35 water base charge, whether I use 0 or you use 100,000 gallons, you're getting that $35. And although it seems like a lot, many utilities are trying to increase their fixed cost recovery, that base charge recovery, because of stability, because the volume side is getting kind of squirrely. People are conserving and continuing to conserve. I mean, the average use per customer, like West Palm Beach, the average use per customer 10 years ago was 10,000 gallons. It's 6,000 gallons now. So the contribution per customer is dropping. And that base charge really protects you. So, and yes, it does. We did look at your fixed cost to design that. And we think it's fair.
All right, well, because I'm actually somewhat surprised that our actual fixed cost of operations is as lower percentage as it turns out to be in the calculations. But I take your word for it. I mean, as long as that was the process that was used, I'm fine.
Yeah, let me say one thing. We're not recovering 100% of your fixed cost. What we're recovering is the peak demand type relationships in your base charge, because most of the water and sewer utility it's almost all fixed. Like say personnel.
Exactly.
That's what you're thinking. And so we looked at relationships on that because you can't have a $90 base charge and a 15-cent flow charge. That's just, we could do that, but
Well, you can, but you're saying
You don't.
that's not desirable, but the fact is that
or
you can't.
common.
I mean, we were told when this water plant was first built, two things that were good features that one, and I don't know if they're still true, but one was that it was already being built with a lot of excess capacity, more than the town was likely to need. So it wasn't likely to need to be expanded.
Okay.
And number two, based on how deep the water we were getting and how contaminated it was when we were getting it before it went through the RO process, from a conservation standpoint, this was not like digging some well where you go out in the backyard, pump it out and drink it. This stuff is it's not damaging much of anything. It's almost like a desalinization plant.
Right, it is. It's basically, you're taking water with high chlorides, salt, and of course you run them through your membranes. It's much more complicated and costly, but
No,
you
I
really
understand.
get water
From
out
a
of it.
conservationist standpoint, it's not like we're tapping into some crystal stream underground.
No, you're not in the Biscayne aquifer there. You may wish you were, but you're not. But yes, you are right. And many utilities as you move forward, this is not just the town of Highland Beach, but all across Florida, you're seeing membrane related type plants being built everywhere. There's the groundwater, it's still a groundwater plant, but that water quality you're talking about, as you know, is getting more and more limited, and we have more and more growth. So it's been a lot of competition for it, which means you got to go deeper with less quality water. You're absolutely right. But
May I ask,
Right.
I'm sorry.
Good. There's another board question there before I
So the the tweaking of the rates that the category you were talking about, obviously, as I've mentioned before, I mean, we can keep doing this forever. And I mean, part of what you talked about just now about conservation and so forth, we don't really know, since we're tweaking up tiers 3 and 4, you know, the big users may say, oh my God, I don't want my bill to go up. I'm going to really reduce my water. I'm going to turn everything off. I'm not going to water anything. And therefore, we're going to have a problem because we're not going to be able to recover the money we need. So, you know, that's something we have to watch. As you say, keep your eye on it and look at it in the future. But in terms of structuring something now, you seem to be in agreement that the structure should be changed and from what it is and
yes.
the proposed structure. But if you were to do that, like one last time, what would you take in? How would you take into consideration? Would that take into consideration the disparity between single family and multifamily?
Generally, for me, the disparity, we're trying to reduce that relationship, that disparity per se. Hold on. That's my meeting.
All right, let me.
It's like, where am I?
All right, may I make a statement here? The analysis and the assumptions and projections are, as we all know, very complex. You, the consultant, have made a number of adjustments and proposals with the town manager and commission input. After listening to all the comments, I believe we're ready to recommend putting the proposal into action, taking the FAB specific comments into consideration. And I think that's for the town commission to do. They've heard it, they see it, and they're watching it. I'd make one additional recommendation, that after a full year's experience, the finance department analyze the results and recommend to the commission if there are any adjustments to be made, if necessary. And saying that, I'd like to make a motion, and when I make the motion, I'm going to leave one issue out, which I'd like an amendment to the motion on, if you folks think it's feasible. The motion would be, I make a motion that the FAB recommends that the commission proceed to approve the water wastewater adjustments and consider the FAB recommendations with a review of actual results in 1 year. The thing that I would like to ask is that the rest of the committee, there were two different proposals, one doing it at a loss and one doing it at a break even. what do we recommend from that perspective? Because there are some other downsides. If water conservation really does take place, there's going to be more of a challenge for additional funds going forward. So my question is, do I like some input as part of my motion, whether or not, which one of the two we should recommend?
I recommend the full, because of all the reasons you just stated, and the fact that if you don't do it, actually the disparity between single family and multi-family gets a little worse, actually. But I just think we should recover it. We should put it all in now, and as you say, look at this thing in, you know, a maximum of 1 year. If we see something happening untoward that we don't like before that, fine. But I think we should put in the max, and let's look at it a year from now.
I mean,
I agree with that.
I guess I have,
Balance the budget.
I guess I would like to take a look at one more shot of trying to come up with one rate structure, one flat fee, one set of tiers that would accomplish the goals better than this.
And then Natasha, in my motion, I'm recommending that they do look at the suggestions of the FAB, that being one of them, but I do not want to hold this thing back. I'd like it to go forward. I think that it's been hashed around. I think decisions have to be made. And I would agree that they should look at all of the recommendations before they vote on the final. But as far as the FAB is concerned, that would be my recommendation.
Agree.
All right, so I'm going to accept the amendment to the motion. If somebody would second that, then we can have discussion on the vote.
I'll second it.
Is there any further discussion on it?
I guess what I'm not clear on, so what are we talking about? Just whether or not we want to do the $90,000 shortfall or do the full?
Yes.
That's all that we're talking about. We're not talking about the different multifamily, single family rates.
No, we're not. We're recommending that the commission look at those issues, but we're also going to recommend the motion now is going to recommend taking the full amount, using that option.
Okay.
So I had a second. I'd like to put it to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion is carried. And again, I want to thank everybody for as it relates to this, and the consultants for all their efforts and information. I know this has been very tedious, and hopefully the commission will take those recommendations that were made by our board into consideration and then make the final decision. So I'd like to, if there's nothing else on this issue, I'd like to move on to the next issue. Next issue on the agenda.
I'm sorry, Chairperson Stern, before you continue, the two previous recommendations that were made prior, we are going in the style of motions. We don't have a second to any of the recommendations that were prior made.
I'm sorry?
By Vice Chair Moore. She made a recommendation earlier. We don't have any seconds to any of those recommendations, as you wanted to hold on until the end of the year. Are we just doing your one recommendation?
Well, my motion was for them to consider all of the recommendations that were made, and clearly that is a key recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
If town manager thinks we need a separate one, we'll go ahead and do it, but I think it's all encompassing in what we put together.
I don't think it'll work because Janelle's got them written down. I can see her smiling, so I know she's got them written down. So we're good.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to move on to the next issue, and it's in new business. And obviously, most of you know I brought this topic up, and it has to do with the discussion on evaluating commission salaries. This all started when I saw in the Star the article about Del Rey, and it got me to thinking in what our commission does do and doesn't do, and the amount of time and effort put in. And I think it's time to analyze and compare with other cities, and then and ask the town to do an evaluation for us so we can consider whether we want to make a specific recommendation on this issue. So I'm going to make a motion, and then we'll have a discussion on the motion. I make a motion to request town managers to do a comparison study of commission salaries to neighboring towns and similar sized towns of Florida. That would be my motion, if anybody would second it.
I'll second that.
Do I hear a second or not?
I have a second.
Oh, thank you. Okay, any discussion?
What?
Okay, we'll take,
if
Hey,
you-
again, what we're doing is we're asking for an investigation at this point. We have a motion on the table. All in favor? Do we need it by name or do we need just a, Janelle, do we need it by name on this or or it's just a aye or an A?
No, you can do it all in favor.
All in favor?
I,
Raise your hand, please, if you're in favor, so we get, all opposed? All right, the motion is carried. I thank you all very much for that. Is there any other new business? All right, that being said, the announcements which you all got and the commission is looking, I was told is not necessary to read. So if there are any questions, I certainly will answer it, but there's a list of what's coming up on different board meetings, et cetera. And if there are no other business, then I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all very much for your patience and really good input. I really appreciate it from everyone. Thank you.